Ladies and gentlemen, please take your seats.
You know, giving up is the hardest part, and if you're within the sound of my voice, that must mean you are in the seats with once more. As always, my name is Dave Voigt, and I'm the host of this podcast where we sit down with a wide-ranging variety of industry professionals and pick their brain about current projects, state of the industry, how they got started, and so very much more in a light and conversational fashion. And if you like how we do things around here, I'm assuming you do. You're listening to the podcast right now. You can subscribe to us. You can find us over at Apple, Spotify, Amazon, Google, basically anywhere you get your podcasts. Plus, we archive every single one of our episodes over at our In the Seats YouTube channel, so if you can give us a like and subscribe there as well, that would be fantastic. Also, you can find us on the social media, as the kids call it. You can find us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at either In the Seats or at It's Podcast One for all sorts of updates. And plus, we're on the TikTok at In the Seats for just a little bit of fun. But finally, at the end of the day, what we really want you to do is come pay us a visit over at In the Seats, intheseats.ca, for all the latest and greatest from the world of film, television, video on demand, festivals, basically the moving image at large. Because if it's if we love to write about it and talk about it, and we love it when you come read about it. So please stop on by on this episode. We're diving into the back catalog a little bit, but it's a good one. We're taking a look at a film. It's a few years old. But it's an interesting little indie drama from our friends at Strikeback Studios, and it's called Quit, from writer-director Dick Rude, and it's basically the story of a couple and their tumultuous relationship and their combined efforts to quit smoking over a weekend at Joshua Tree. It's insightful, it's honest, it works incredibly well, and we got the distinct pleasure of sitting down with writer-director Dick Rude to talk about this film and the ideas behind it and so very much more. And I hope you enjoy our talk with Dick, because I know I did.
David, thanks for having me on and for promoting Quit. I really appreciate that.
Now, I guess my first question is, walk me through sort of the origin of the story, man, because I just finished watching it and I absolutely dug it.
I'm glad that you did. I wanted to explore the dynamic that happens when humans are seeking pleasure and experience pain. So I started thinking about the different ways that we do that. Obviously, the most obvious one being in a relationship with someone that causes us anguish, and to that end, it seems like the amount of emotional pain is commensurate to the amount of passionate, good feelings that you typically have in those relationships. And I started thinking about other things that make you feel that way, like smoking, and I recognize that not everyone is a smoker, but everyone can relate to some sort of excessive behavior in their life, whether it's working out too much or being a workaholic, or running too much. These all feel good in the moment, but in excess can be very detrimental.
No, for sure. I think the thing that really blew me away was just the storytelling device. I mean, it's such a simple device to sort of really get into this very sort of human story that, like you say, we can all relate to, because it's a pain that we all kind of put ourselves through. Can you talk to me just a little bit about finding your cast and finding sort of the right people to play these parts? Because you've really got to have commitment to have people to be able to sort of tear into each other the way your two leads do here.
Yeah, I think you have to have a personal past with this kind of stuff, and I do believe that the actors did relate very strongly, and it wasn't what I found. It wasn't just them. I found this out in the very beginning when I started to cast the film. After I do the readings, I'd have the actors come up to me and say, were you in the room when I had this conversation? Because what you wrote is word for word conversations that I've had before. And I found that I had tapped into something very core that goes on between people when they're in love and when they're fighting. And so I was really happy about that, and it made me want to look for the actors that could relate to that the most, because they would be able to portray that the best. On the part of the lead, Noah Segan, he really did understand the anxiety and cerebral aspect necessary to be in love with something and try and let go of it. And on the part of Diora Baird, she brings a certain passion about life in general to the role that was very much like the character that I wrote. She leads with the heart, he leads with the head, and they both have their own ways of doing it. Neither one is necessarily right or wrong. It sort of sums up the way men and women tend to be.
No, and I think you're absolutely right. And I mean, I think the other thing that really stood out for me that I love was just the location, because I mean, Joshua Tree really has this sort of environment of being just sort of adjacent to the real world. Like, can you
Yeah.
talk to me a little bit about just finding sort of the right spot to sort of tell this story? Because like if you had done it sort of at a random cottage or something, it might have felt like a different film.
Yeah, totally. The desert is so beautiful and so dangerous. And so is love, right?
Mm.
And so it really was obvious to me. I was like, yeah, love is like this thing. You're going along and you feel great. And then, like, you're in so much pain, and like something happens all of a sudden that you just didn't expect to happen. And the desert's very much the same way. It can be, the sun can be shining and it's beautiful outside, and the next minute you're caught up in a flash flood and you're washing down the river. And I had spent some time in Joshua Tree, and I had seen these things that had happened that I actually brought to the film, that were felt awkward to portray in the film, because I was thinking, will anyone believe this? Truth is stranger than fiction, particularly like in the beginning. I hate to do spoilers, but there's a big tarantula in one of the scenes. Now, I mean, literally, that happened to me. I was sitting there reading the paper, and a tarantula just walked up on me like, no big deal. And I was just, this is not something you're used to when you grow up in the city. It's beautiful and it's dangerous, and it comes out of left field. And so I like the instability of that setting, because it really did highlight the instability that occurs when someone is trying to quit something.
For sure. No, I think you're absolutely right. It really does speak to sort of how fragile the human psyche can get, especially in those moments when you're trying to ditch that dependency, be it chemical or psychological. And I mean, like you said in the film, the chemical part of it goes away pretty quick. It's the psychological part that's the hard one.
Well, that's it. We, as humans, we just think we're so damn powerful, and then you put us in an environment where it becomes really clear really quickly that you're not the one in control. And so I like that. I liked that visual metaphor to be able to tell the story.
No, for sure, man. It works brilliantly. And I mean, I've got to ask, because I mean, in doing my research for this, I looked you up, I went through your credits, and I was like, this guy's got an interesting path. And I mean, like, how did you ultimately get into this business? How did a guy who has smaller parts on like Repo Man and Night of the Comet come to sort of direct his own feature?
Yeah, I think people remember the name. They may not remember what it is that I've done, but I started out as an actor and as a screenwriter. And one of the first screenplays I wrote was incorporated into a little film called Repo Man. So I had a creative consultant credit on that film, but really the script was written by Alex Cox with a picture of me in front of his typewriter. And, I pretty much had everything to do with that film all along the way. At one point, I was going to star in it with Lee Ving, the singer of the band Fear. And so that was kind of my first real well, my foray into a legitimate commercial filmmaking, if you can call it that, because it was quite independent. And I was 19 years old. And so it's pretty cool to be able to express the music and the culture and the zeitgeist going on in the early 80s, and the politics and just everything that I was about as a teenager. And I just never looked back. I've always worn different hats. I've always enjoyed acting and writing and directing. I went on to do music videos and then write and act in my own films. And I made a documentary with Joe Strummer of The Clash before he died. And I had a band at some point, and we toured with the Red Hot Chili Peppers and Nirvana and some pretty notable acts. And you know, I've just always been about doing what I had to do. I think I never really sought any of this out. I just was sort of, this is what I'm supposed to do, and so I've done it. And when it wasn't time to do those things, I didn't.
That almost strikes me as a bit of a punk rock aesthetic, just to sort of do as you do in the moment when you're doing it.
Yeah. It's very much what this film is about too, by the way. It's a very much a sort of, look, I'm not telling you to smoke or to quit smoking. I'm not telling you it's good or it's bad. All I'm saying is just have an awareness, have a self-awareness about yourself and where you're at and why you're doing what you're doing. You can love the pleasure, you can love the pain, you can say it's all worth it, or you can give it all up. But really, it's just about being in that moment, and being in the desert. And even though these people are together, they're very much alone, and quitting something is very much an alone thing. And we all have feelings, we all get our heart broken, and when you get your heart broken, it feels like nothing you've ever felt like, and you can't really retell those feelings to somebody else. But all of those feelings are valid and equal, and everyone's journey is equal. You know what I mean? Like, not to make the comparisons, but even through history, you can compare everyone's dark night of the soul, and they're all just as equal in the way that they make you feel and what you're faced with in having to look at yourself.
No, you're absolutely right, man. And I mean, I really love sort of the visual aesthetic that you put on this film, because there's like, I could see a lot of different elements just in terms of sort of the storytelling and the back and forth, but even just from a visual standpoint. I'm kind of curious, like, what sort of influenced you, especially visually, making something like this?
I wanted to do it with a very guerrilla style. I had a sort of a homage to a French vibe going on, but also very much a Cassavetes verite vibe about it, where because it's such an intimate story, and having too much static over an hour and a half on just two characters was going to bore the hell out of me. There had to be a lot of movement, there had to be a lot of verite, it had to be very much fly on the wall, because we're experiencing people's emotions that are very high and very low and very intense. And so I wanted the audience to be inside of that as opposed to just looking at it. And Tom Richmond, who shot the film, is an absolute genius. He had worked with me on Straight to Hell. He's won awards for Little Odessa and Right at Your Door. And I met Tom Richmond when I started my career at the age of 15. He was at the American Film Institute, and I was just a little punk actor kid at Lee Strasberg. And so we've always had this beautiful working relationship. So he was genius, and I managed to get a lot of old friends that were overly competent at what they did to come and help make the film, and that collaboration made it everything that it became, for sure.
Now, I mean, why do you think films like some of the ones you just mentioned, like Straight to Hell and Repo, obviously, that you've been involved with, and this, have a sense of sort of timelessness to them? And I'm kind of curious from your perspective, A lot of
It's
the
hard to say.
a lot of stuff we see these days kind of loses that timelessness. You know what I mean? It sort of exists in its own bubble. Like you
It's
can't make
true.
straight to hell now, but it straight to hell works perfectly where it is, kind of thing. You know,
Yeah.
and same
Yeah,
with
it's true. It's true. It's hard to say. I don't know. I'm not a I've never been that smart to figure any of that stuff out. I just know in the making of it, and I never really stop in the making of it to even examine it. It really wasn't until after I made Repo Man and I look back years back on it that I realized how extraordinary it was that we did that and what it meant to so many people and culturally, and just how lucky and blessed I was to even have the opportunity to do what I was doing in that time at that age, and to be able to bring that kind of you know entertainment to the world. It was extraordinary. I think that I can only guess as much as you or any of your viewers would have their own opinion, and at the end of the day, who cares about it? But I think when things are made from pure intention, meaning you didn't sit down and think about how you're going to make a hit film or a hit song.
right.
You just sort of went with what was in your heart. It was pure intention. You created it along the way. As it started to become its own living entity, it dictated itself as to what it was going to turn out to be. And then it became about what the perception of that entity was at the end of the day. Whether or not that gives it any kind of longevity, I don't know. But I do believe that things made out of pure intention that way tend to be honest and therefore timeless.
For sure. No, I absolutely agree with you. Now, I mean, this is a silly question, but it's one I always like to ask. Thinking back to the younger days, what was sort of the one piece of sort of entertainment or piece of work that maybe sort of stood out for you as like a pivot moment that made you want to be a storyteller?
God, I have a lot of those moments. I I was 7 years old when The Godfather came out,
Wow. Okay.
and I had no business going to see that movie at 7 years old. And I don't think, and my parents weren't really that cool, to be honest with you. They just were not cool people. But they took me to the drive-in, and I was sitting in the back seat, and we saw the first feature, probably whatever kid movie that was. And actually, it probably wasn't. It was like the Iger sanction or something like really hardcore. And then it was like The Godfather. I don't think they knew what they were getting into, or that why they had brought their kid to it. But I watched that film and I was just riveted as a 7-year-old. I could not believe what I was seeing. And I mean, as an adult, you can't believe what you're seeing when you watch that film. It's so moving. And I never looked back, understand that was 1971. So for me, my whole world and my whole influence of film happened in that indie era of the late 60s and the early 70s, which was such a heyday of great filmmaking, and I think that was the biggest influence on me for sure. I remember like getting sick or wanting to be sick and staying home from school, and watching Taxi Driver for the thousandth time. Just those were the movies that really had an influence on me. And the more that I got into filmmaking, the more I explored, other great filmmakers like Luis Buñuel, or just these guys that were out there that were about telling cool stories in whatever way they wanted to, unedited.
And you know what? I think you've added to that with Quit, because I mean, it's honest, it's cool, it's unabashed, and it's a fantastic piece of work. And I just want to say thank you again for the time today, and congratulations again on the film. Now that's getting a fresh new audience these years later. And again, just thank you for the time. This was a lot of fun.
Man, thank you for having me on, and I hope all your viewers go out and watch the film, and whether they love it or they hate it, I hope they feel something at the end of it. And let's spread the word. Get your friends to go watch it. All right, go see Quit.
And with any piece of work, man, that's the important thing, to get it seen and to have a conversation one way or the other. Thanks again for the time, man. This was great.
All right.
And don't forget to visit our friends over at Bay Street Video for all your DVD, Blu-ray rental, or purchasing needs this summer, as they are still open for curbside and some mailing delivery as well. Over at 1172 Bay Street, Toronto, Ontario, Canada, you can give them a call at 416-964-9088. That's 416-964-9088. Or send them an email at baystreetvideoto@gmail.com for any of your DVD and Blu-ray needs.